Just go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, because of this situation, it was just described in the sense that some of you may already be familiar with what I've been working on for quite some time now, since the late 1990s. And some of you and I know each other. I feel very fortunate to be able to be here with you. Also, I feel very fortunate to be achieving one of my lifelong dreams, which is to become more like Max Headroom. So thank you. Also, I want to start first by saying that there is a real importance to physical events such as FUBAR, so I'm very happy to be there physically on that computer, on that physical device, because the embodied conversations and discussions that happen in real time in IRL and AFK are very important for our communities. It's this kind of proximity of being next to and with each other in meetups and check-ins to be able to have encounters, to encounter each other is very critically important. The online experiences that we have are great, and the net is also real life. It's real life when I'm on the internet. It's real life when you're on the internet. However, when you're currently at least partially away from keyboards, I'm very close to two keyboards, the one in front of me and the one in front of me. But this kind of meeting face-to-face, especially for those of you that are there physically, is really crucial because it provides new opportunities and new engagements that are different and that do feel different. I also know, because I organize and I curate events and exhibitions, I know how much work it takes to produce these types of events in different places. It's an exceptional amount of work, labor and time and energy, and including finances, money that goes into making it happen. So I really want to thank everybody who had any part in organizing the event. So today, I said that I would give a talk which in stylized language is called glitchActual. So I want to answer questions that are posed to me from the prompts that Dina gave me in terms of what to address in this talk. But I also want to keep it conversational because of everything that I was just saying before. To start, though, however, I have a little piece about glitchActual that I'll say, and also because of the technosocial situation that we're in terms of the computer.
No. Wait. You just had to mention it.
Yeah, exactly. Just reload it.
Reload.
You want a messaging? Say reloading.
I don't have the internet here.
Can you freeze the frame?
Yeah, I'll share mine.
Or watching? Okay.
Hey, John.
No.
Hey, I'm back.
Yeah, sorry, it froze, so we reloaded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was literally saying, if anything goes wrong. I was literally saying that. I screenshot it so that I could prove it later. What was the last thing that I was saying from your side that you heard?
In this technosocial situation.
If anything goes wrong, you should let me know. Cool. Perfect. Okay. So glitchActual, the term actual in the title glitchActual refers to a few different feelings that I have They are in part about the definition of actuality. In the beginning of cinema, so now we're talking about at the turn of 2 centuries ago, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, when cinema was just starting, there was the use of this term actualities. And so there were films that were made that were called actualities. It was a genre of filmmaking, and in fact it was like the most popular and widely distributed form of filmmaking at that time, at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s. And so it was called actuality, and these films were called actualities. We would now refer to them more as documentary or nonfiction or creative nonfiction. And those of us that are in new media, glitch art, we would also refer to those as screen grabbing or screen recording, because what those were, that media approach was that it was an attempt by people to capture in real time their lived realities. So the real experiences of their lives, and that means unstaged with non-actors, improvised or actual situations would be recorded on film, and those were called actualities. I'm also thinking about how we're trying now with glitch art to do that type of work today. We're trying to capture our lived realities because art in technological times, our arts in our technosocial times, have much to do with not only how all of these interrelated technological and social systems work, but also where they fail and how they break down, those liminal or boundary points at which they break. Obviously, for those of us that are here in this room, in that room, we are interested in exploiting and exploring those moments, those boundary states, thresholds between functional, non-functional, and then being able to repeat or not repeat those types of events. So that's one reason why I'm thinking and feeling through actualities. Another reason to use this word actual is because it refers to, you might also use the word authentic in place of the word actual. So actual brings up the idea of authenticity, and it connects us to questions like, what is the real glitch? Or what is the real glitch art? Or is this really a glitch? Or is this really a glitch art? Now, I should say that I'm personally extremely disinterested in those questions. At least in terms of the answers that people propose to those questions, I'm extremely disinterested in formally answering the questions about, is this a real glitch or is this a real glitch art? I am, though, excited by people posing those questions and the ways that people find to pose responses. Also, obviously, we know about the kinds of flame wars and shitstorms that result from those types of questions. And those shitstorms and flame wars can be interesting, they can be exciting and even entertaining. But the fact is that I hope and I think that we all can agree that we live in a time now where these questions, they presuppose that one can define what is inside and outside of the category of art. And we know this to be untrue. We can't make these types of distinctions because we live in a Duchampian era. It's been 100 years now that we've been living in the world that resulted from Marcel Duchamp's work that he initiated specifically in 1917. So from 1917 till the present time, we have 100 years of art in terms of contemporary art, acknowledging that when an artist when the artist makes the choice and selects the art, then that is the art. And now we live in a hyper-capitalist time, also when the market itself chooses what is and isn't art, and those choices we may or may not agree with. We might disagree with what the market decides is or isn't art, but the markets, and by that I don't mean in the abstract, like what most people from a certain political view would say. I don't mean like an abstract, the market, I mean the people that make up the market. They make these choices also, and then what they choose becomes the art. And we can't really question whether or not that category is legitimate because of Marcel Duchamp, and we've been living in this Duchampian era for 100 years. Cool. So this idea of authenticity also raises a kind of competitive landscape that we live in. Religious folks use the phrase holier than thou, and I don't know if this exists in other languages. It does, because I would imagine this is a kind of global phenomenon, but religious folks, they use this holier than thou to refer to a competition between each other about who is more or less religious. And I grew up punk rock. I grew up in punk rock culture, and the punk rock culture that I grew up in, that I'm from culturally, has a similar competition about who's more or less hardcore. And in that kind of competition, it's called harder core than thou. Yeah. So it's kind of, not to point fingers, but vegans do it a lot. And there's this kind of extreme, in my opinion, waste of time that people engage in, because at the very least it's very divisive. And it really is a kind of waste of time. And at the very worst, it's very corrosive and damaging to the culture in general, and to people in particular. It hurts people specifically. And so this is a kind of conflict or conflictual situation that we don't really need. We don't really need to feel this way. Also, on a related note, in BDSM or fetish or kink culture, there's, in fetish and kink communities, there's a distinction which is called living the life 24/7. And what that means is that you're always out. Like, you're always out presenting that you're fetish, that you're kink culture, that you are of the fetish kink community. And you're doing that 24/7. It's called living the life 24/7. That's very difficult for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Realistically speaking, that's very difficult for a lot of people. One minor reason, maybe major, minor, is that a lot of people have to go to work at a workplace where you basically probably can't be presenting that you're fetish, kink, 24/7. So it's difficult, but it's probably more possible that people could live the glitch or glitch art life 24/7. Probably possible, but still difficult. I personally have I've been trying to do that, been working on doing that in my life, and I've really been able to establish and maintain those possibilities. in my life of living the glitch 24/7, of living the glitch art life 24/7, by being very hardcore about glitch and glitch art, and by being committed to the culture, by being committed to what is and was and will be different glitch scenes, and mayhaps most importantly, through the support of those communities. That's probably the most important reason that I've been able to establish and maintain a 24/7 glitch life, is because of the support of the communities, including the fact that y'all were having conversations at Fubar physically, and then as a result you decided to invite me to be here with you now on this computer. Just a second, let me grab another computer.
Oh.
There's a robot computer in here. I had to turn that robot computer off. There's a few robots in here. Those of you that know me know that I'm actually really worried about robots. So it's fucked up that I have a few of them in my house. But that's like the complicated world we live in. So my point was saying that I'm very happy to be here. This is the part of the talk which is a type of intro to what I have to say and why I'm saying it. So this is the part where I definitely wanted to get through that introductory part. Thank you. The next part has some propositional, provisional responses to the questions or the prompts that Dina gave me to prepare for today. And in this part, I would love to just hear from you at any time, at any point. You may have noticed that if I get on a roll, I can really keep going. So because I'm not able to look out immediately and see people's facial reactions, I'm not necessarily going to know if somebody wants to say something. So go ahead and please interrupt me by just, speaking up and stuff. And we can stop and talk about any part of this that is more or less interesting for everyone or anyone. Okay? Okay. So, Dina asked me to talk about the unstable arts now known as glitch art, with an emphasis on what glitch art was, is, and could be in regards to sharing, remix, and or decentralization of source materials. So that was the kind of package of ideas, prompts that I'm starting from. So, in other words, that is some of the what's and whys and how-tos of the unstable arts now known as glitch art, which we all share commitments to, which we all are here to work on, to make, to discuss, and to basically energize. I'm gonna try to keep my Star Trek references to a minimum, although I'm really excited about Star Trek Discovery. Super awesome. Yeah. So, in terms of what glitch art was, or is, or could be, there's this question of sharing, remixing, and or decentralizing the source materials that people are using to make the glitch art. So these are the materials, this is the source that people are glitching, and or in the cases of code, this is the source code that enables the glitching to occur. Any or all of that type of content can be shared, can be remixed. In the case of, let's say, open source software development, that's called forking. So it can be shared and then changed in a decentralized manner. Those changes result in a few different types of outcomes. Those outcomes include permutation, so that's where we see a change to the arrangement or the order of the glitch art when there's a permutation of the source material. We can also see iteration, where there's a repetition of processes that result in different results, different outcomes. So that's where people use the same process over and over and over and over again. Maybe some of you are thinking of some processes that you've seen over and over and over and over again. I'll go ahead and say, pixel sorting. Because,
Yeah.
we know each other. Data bending, data moshing, in principle, these are processes, and we see them used over and over and over and over again. That repetition of the process produces iterations of the outcomes. So we see kind of subgenres or subcategories are created. So the data moshing form of glitch art, the pixel sorting form of question mark, is it or is it not glitch art, etc. We see these built up by the repetition of a process and then iterations of those outcomes. Then there's another type, so we have permutation, iteration, and variation is the third type, where in variation there's changes in the terms or conditions, the parameters, and then we see variable types of outcomes, even with the same, so you have one input, but you have different kinds of outputs because there's variation in the process based on the conditions or the parameters. And there's another fourth one that I'm really interested in general, which is called instantiation. And this is a technical term that those of you from computer programming are familiar with. Instantiation, a technical term which comes to us mainly now through the lens of object-oriented programming. And with instantiation, you get different instances of the same object, for instance. But then you are able to change those instantiations in ways that include inheritance from the parent of the instance. So you have these instances, and what's fascinating about this for us in glitch art is that what is maintained is the very real technical connection between the instance and the parent. So the kind of question of like inheritance is literally encoded in the digital objects. Then there is the kind of larger sociological or philosophical question that I really encountered at Glitch Art Instead in Minneapolis. I really encountered this very strongly from people, which I think was a kind of unstated theme of Glitch Art Instead, which was, if I could just paraphrase it, would be the saying, if I glitch it, is it mine? Like, if I made the glitches to the content, the source material, then does that become mine because I glitched it? Which is, I think, actually a really exciting and interesting question about cultural materials, and if I affect something, then does the fact that I affected it make it mine in a sense? So these are all about aesthetics and concepts and techniques. Some of this is more technical, and some of it is more conceptual or social. I've been using this word technosocial because the technologies and the socialities are very deeply interrelated to one another. So we're technical in terms of glitch art, and we're social in terms of the communities that we're a part of. And you can't, I don't believe, meaningfully separate those technologies and those societies because they're informing each other in very fundamental ways. Everybody might have already thought about this. I might just be stating it for the records, or maybe this is an introduction to be able to have a conversation about. those topics. So because I've been around in this world doing this for a while now, I have thoughts about where we were and where we are and where we're going. In terms of what glitch art was, there's a way in which glitch art was previously very feral, and we used to use this term feral glitch to describe the way in which glitches were wild. So glitches in the wild, feral glitches, wild glitches that you capture or you try to capture, like missing no, like Pokemon. And everybody knows you can't capture missing no, because if you do, you're in a fuck lot of trouble. Right?
Right.
Because you met missing no and you were like, this is the coolest Pokemon ever. This is the rarest of glitches. And then you capture missing no, and of course, what that means is you get fucked for that. But that's appropriate. So missing no is actually a great example of a kind of wild glitch, a feral glitch from the wild that we can't capture, or that if we do capture it, really, it's going to fuck us up. So missing no is also another good example, because that is a feral glitch that was naturally occurring. I mean, think about kind of like, I'm being careful when I use the word natural, but if we think of the Nintendo entertainment system as being natural, a natural environment, or a media environment, then that's a glitch that is occurring in that natural environment. It's also a glitch that's occurring because of people who are part of a natural environment, and computers and physical things that are in the physical world. Just like how when cartridges would glitch out because you pulled them out of the console, then this was a kind of naturally occurring feral, wild glitch. So that's definitely one of the places we come from. And in some ways we've gotten to a point where more often glitches in glitch art are tamed and are domesticated. They have, in many cases, moved from being wild and feral to being domesticated, tamed. And they could, in some future, like where we were, where we are, where we're going, they could, in some future sense, very often become zoographical. And by zoographical, I mean like descriptions the same way that animals are described in a zoo. Also, one place that we come from is music. We have to always remember and acknowledge that we come from music. So glitch music was definitely an important genre that was very influential for glitch as a category of art. So from the category of music in the mid-late 90s into the early 2000s to the category of glitch art now in what is now the late 20-teens. This culture of music was very fundamental to the culture of art that we are all part of. Also, there is, as we know, a lot of, especially post-glitch fashion, and there's a way in which there's a lot of post-glitch video game aesthetics and video game development in the present, in the 20-teens. And then I have some thoughts about where we might, what we might see in the future. I think those might be more explicitly forms of warfare, especially in terms of tactical glitches, camouflage, thwarting, facial recognition systems by using glitch art and glitch techniques. This is already something that's being done, as well as like asymmetrical attacks from the perspective of computer and information security. So also catastrophic technosocial failures like electromagnetic pulses and whatnot represent a very extreme kind of future possibility of the weaponized use of glitches. Also, in the past, glitch art was difficult. This is maybe somewhat more contentious for some people, but there was a level of difficulty in the past. And in the present, this level of difficulty has been reduced in some ways. And that reduction of difficulty has produced more ease and has made making glitch art more easy in some ways. I'm not saying this in a pejorative, I'm not making a value distinction. I'm not being pejorative about it being easy. In fact, from dirty new media art perspective, I'm really excited by and believe in fast, dirty, punk approaches. So ease of production is not necessarily, I'm not saying anything necessarily negative about that, but I think it's really fairly factual that there were glitch art approaches that were extremely difficult in the past that have become increasingly more easy, that they've become easier to execute. And I think that could lead us to both more ease in the future, where certain types of techniques that are difficult today become easier, but it's also going to lead us towards more difficulty because the technosocial systems are always changing. In particular, the technologies that are developed, like the apps, the software apps, especially on mobile devices that are authored for, especially iOS, very closed, very inaccessible operating systems become more difficult or impossible in the future. So there's old style glitch art that is, as of today, very difficult, more difficult than it was in the past because the operating systems have changed and it's very difficult to reproduce or produce those types of artworks or effects today because of those technological changes. So those are, I've run through three where there were 3 changes from before to now to possibly what could happen. Here's a 4th called dirtiness. And glitch art, I believe, has been, is, and will be dirty. It's dirty stuff. The stuff I love is also dirty stuff in the sense that in the past, that kind of dirty new media art, that kind of dirt was really impure dirt and dirty in the sense of impurities. It also is now dirty in the sense of being very leaky, like categories always leak, like Trinity Minha says, that categories always leak. So you can try real hard to have a category called glitch or glitch art, but it's going to be leaky because we're people, and people are made of water and leaky. That dirtiness in the future is probably also about stuff getting messier, more diffuse, but also there's probably a tendency to try to make glitches and glitch art cleaner, and as that is attempted, as people attempt to make glitch or glitch art cleaner, other people are going to respond and dirty it up. So it'll get dirtier simultaneously. I have more.
Yes, please.
Anyone want to jump in anywhere?
Well,
I'll keep going.
yeah.
Remember-
Okay.
What's this?
Yeah, maybe. the dirtiness and cleanliness. Like what we're doing here is kind of more of a documentative exhibition, and that's what we are trying to communicate to people. Like even though these glitches are only kind of previews and tamed forms and versions of the glitches that were maybe found or instigated. And we're trying to communicate the process behind it, but it's always like, because we're doing this on a project logic, there's still a lot of compromise that we're actually looking to avoid in the future and make it as true as possible in a way, because in order to get people here, everything, like a lot of it needs to be actually clean, and it's quite frustrating in a way. So that maybe bring me to my question, if it's okay, if it's an okay time to ask a question.
Yeah.
That's how much of advocating do you need to do in order to kind of show the true nature of glitch art? Because like if you're showing it in an institutionalized context, then everything is expected to work, to be there on time, to be printed, to be distributed, to be promoted, to be even so it needs to be like politically correct also in a way, and that's not the true nature of an artistic process. So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, like, do you need to make compromise, and did you kind of find the way to counter the pressure that you're getting from the institutions that you're working with, if there is any pressure at all?
Totally.
Yeah, because the Croatian art scene is still quite classical. Like our new media is mostly performance and multimedia based, not really so much experimental. There's about
Also not digital.
not digital. Like people would today, like people would still perceive if you're working with your computer, it's exclusively leisure time. So that's the situation we're trying to change the context of the digital creation.
Yeah. So I will respond to what I think the different parts of what you're talking about, and if I get parts of those wrong, just let me know and then I can readjust.
Okay, thanks.
So part of what I think that you're talking about, or part of what I hear you talking about, is what I would call accessibility. And is that what you mean, like accessibility?
Yeah.
Right. So there's one piece that's like accessibility for people outside of us, in terms of outside of this immediate group that's in the room there and here. Maybe this connects somewhat to what you were talking about in your talk. But basically, like, what do we need to do to make our work accessible to people who are perhaps outside of this immediate community, right? Is that right?
Yeah, well, but I kind of prefer a situation where the artist himself doesn't need to make a compromise and doesn't need to tame his work in order
Do both at the same time, like keep it
right. So it's like
compromised and presentable. Yeah.
right. So it's like, are we trying to talk to people? Who are we talking to? Are we talking to ourselves? Are we talking to other people? How are we getting other people into and out of the conversation? How are we getting ourselves into and out of the conversation? And that is also about translation. because we have to be, if we're interested in our message going outside of our immediate communities, then we are also engaged in a process of translating between the concerns that are very specific inside of our own communities and then concerns that are maybe less specific in the larger context. And maybe that is the point at which there is the possibility for compromise, and maybe that compromise is about the content of the work, as well as, of course, the presentation of the work. Because when the work is presented in galleries or museums or in different spaces that are cultural spaces that other people have access to and they come into, there has to be some level of accessibility and cleanliness and kind of order that people are able to walk into, right? Yeah? Okay. So, a person may, as an artist, may have to make compromises when translating from their interior experience to their immediate community to the larger context that they're working in. I do believe that, again, like I said, growing up punk rock, coming from punk rock culture, I was always already compromised. My punk rock culture was this is like pre-Nirvana, this is like before Nirvana, but I lived through this moment where we were already having an authentic culture sold back to us as commercial products. So to me, I grew up always already compromised on that cultural front, and I don't imagine, I'm an impurist, I'm not a purist, so I don't imagine that I can make a distinction of some place that I can be unaffected by the cultures that I live in. So I know that I'm compromised. The question I think that you're raising takes us to the territory of how far does an artist have to go, or how far does an arts organization have to go before you have gone too far, and before you've compromised too much, and you've given up too much. And that's a very difficult decision for people to make, but it's a very personal decision. And it has to do with, I think that we all want to do our projects. We all want to work on our work in whatever form that takes. And so we need to do what we need to do in order to make that happen. But I definitely do believe that we also need to have positions that they might change over time, but like moral and ethical positions that we state and we take up, and we also defend for ourselves and for other people. So you have to judge for yourself, like, how far is too far? How much is too much? When did I go too far and compromise too much? And also sometimes that has to happen so that you can refactor your approach and be more grounded.
That's great, thank you.
Like, okay, that's the way that I just described that was kind of abstract.
No, it is.
But
Yeah, it's
like
good.
it comes down to funding sometimes. Like, what do I need to do in order to get the funding in order to make the project that I need to make or want to make? And sometimes in order to get the funding to do something, you have to make compromises. The question is like, how much do you compromise? And then do you balance that out by self-funding, by self-organizing? And where do you decide, okay, this I have to do myself so that I have to pay for this myself somehow, so that I can make sure that I can do it the way that it needs to be done.
Yeah, thanks. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really ferries through Passport. So it's really a valuable experience in a way, and we're looking forward to broadening up the spectrum of our initiatives. And
Right.
at the same time, it's really important for us to get through, to show the people's work as they want it to be shown. So it's all like a huge process, especially because like we're coming from a mixed background, and it's like in the software community, in our local software community, it's much easier to communicate these kinds of ideas. So it's actually easier to work with them. And in the arts community and with the arts funding, it's a bit trickier. So it's kind of weird being bilingual constantly in order to get one idea through. So
Right.
yeah. So thanks for your reply. We're kind of gathering as much info as you can. Yeah, and also regarding the theme of the exhibition, I'd also like what I mentioned, that the creation art scene is kind of just becoming digitized in a way, and becoming digital. So the idea of a shared authorship is quite new. People are and have been working with other artists, other people have studios, like artisans working for them, but you'd never see that acknowledged, like publicly acknowledged, like who participated in the collaboration of one work. So we're also trying to open up this discussion in the area of shared authorship, which we deem like really important, because there, as you mentioned, like technosocial is like it's two things, but they are like interlinked with one another. So it's quite important. And currently, Croatia has a huge DIY scene. Yeah, it's kind of coming up. Yeah, the maker scene,
But it's coming from the mainstream, it's not.
yeah, it's coming from the mainstream and from the fiscal perspective, mostly. I mean, that would be the most critical interpretation of it. And I think it's really important, to talk about not only how to do something, but why to do it, and how you make it happen, not how to make it. Yeah, so that's kind of our angle, and I think there's still a lot of work to do. You'd actually never see one piece with the technician background, with the back end acknowledged. So I wanted to ask, is maybe now with the art scene in Chicago, do you possibly have the same trend of single authorship and of the romanticized author, or is it kind of more distributed and heterogeneous?
Yeah, so this is another really big topic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. It's awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it with you. Start out with first, you used the phrase shared authorship, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So shared authorship is a fascinating concept, and if we look to fields where shared authorship is very well defined and worked out, we would see, for instance, in the free and open source software development communities, that shared authorship is a foundation. It's like the bedrock basis of free open source software development. I mean, you might be a software developer who's programming your application by yourself, But even if you program the whole thing start to finish by yourself and then you release it online as free open source software, you're still expecting that other people will potentially open it up, look at its source code and take it in different directions, fork it off into different directions, or just make changes or improvements to it. So that's one example. If you're a free open source software developer who's just kind of like contributing, again, that's not pejorative. I don't mean like just contributing, but I mean like if you are contributing to projects that are out there, you might like see just one piece of software, just one part of it, just one aspect of it that you think, oh, I could do something with this. I can improve this, or I can, and you would work on just that part. So you could be either like this person who's developing everything from scratch and then releasing it, or you could be somebody who's in the community and sees some small detail and says, I can work with this detail. Those are both different types of shared authorship. And in free open source software development, this is all very well worked out because of attribution. So in free open source software development, you have attribution, which is tied to any alteration or any change to any piece of the source code. And that is a great model for anyone and everyone to look at because it's been so successful. Like, there are all these operating systems that are entire operating systems that run as free open source software. So that's a super successful culture. That we don't have exactly that same model or approach in even new media digital art, even though we could. Now with blockchain technologies, there is more possibility that with blockchain you could actually have, you could be producing something that is a kind of digital object. You could be producing something that is, let's say, a video or even a still image. And if it were blockchain, it could, embedded inside of it, there could be attribution of everyone who did anything to it. So that is totally possible, and I think that we really have to think about that because this becomes a big issue, This becomes a big issue where somebody says that they did something, or somebody sees something that they did being represented as being done by somebody else. This is, like everybody who's on the internet in our community knows about this, from like Tumblr and Facebook and etc. This really is a conflictual situation if somebody sees something that they made and then they see it represented as if it was made by someone else. There are actually mechanical technologies to prevent that from happening in a sense. I mean, blockchaining digital objects would be like one way to know exactly who had done what to that digital object. But also, this free open source software development model is a really fantastic model.
Yeah.
So we should GitHub everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not really as applicable to art as it is to actual software because, you can't really GPL an art piece, you could.
You can, you totally can.
You could.
The GPL license.
Yeah, of course you could, but it's more of a Creative Commons thing then. You can CC0 it, of course, but how do you take an exact little piece of art, which is both code and visual code at the same time, and how do you, it's not the same. For code, it's like, it's easy, it's directly applicable, everything is open, everybody knows who did what where, like anybody can read it, but for art, of course, it's doable if you kind of compromise and make art that's done for this, but how can you just apply it to any random image somewhere? It's much more difficult because, it could be done.
Don't you, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Don't you, GPL code, in
Turn
its,
around, so.
the GPL, the GPL code in its original form, so like you can compile it in one single way, or can you compile some code in more ways?
What do you mean?
I don't understand.
What do you mean?
You have a base which is licensed and which is the creation, and you have the derivatives of that.
No, but what do you mean about compiling? I mean, once you compile it, it's another code, it's binary data.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
it's based on the same code, the same
Yeah.
as the image, even though it's permutated afterwards.
Yeah, but it's
it
not-
would be based on the same source.
Yeah, but then you'd need to have more layers of like programming an image, which you
So
don't.
compiling it.
Because you can open it with a hex editor, but you're not actually viewing its source code. You're viewing the binary image data. You know?
So one of the distinctions here, I think, is that you're dealing with binary image versus textual,
Yeah.
or binary data versus textual data. But it is actually possible to version binary data.
It is,
It's
it
just
is.
harder and more annoying.
Yeah.
And the UI representation of what that is gets really weird. Because like Perforce does that because it's really important to version software for your video games, for like any sort of like asset or creative media campaign, etc. But like John is saying with blockchain and something like that, it could be possible. But that is a big problem to solve in this.
And of course, then it's also it's a centralization thing because you can't just take an image, do whatever you want with it, and like when you put it back somewhere, there's like no real way to know that someone did the change outside of the system. So someone should use a system that tracks changes. And I mean, let's say doing something with GitHub, okay, it's the same thing with GitHub. You can clone it and do whatever you want with it. But I mean, the system makes you want to use it, because it would be really difficult to make it like appealing to artists to use such a thing because we don't actually get anything from it. The only thing you get from it is being able to track who changed what and. So yeah,
I think it's also relevant to add to this that we're actually talking about blockchaining stable data right now. The fact that this whole discussion is brought onto the subjects such as unstable media, such as glitchActual, adds a whole different dimension to it that we cannot use this kind of technology to describe something that acts randomly. And yeah, I just wanted to point that out before we went like really deeply into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting model is hit record. I don't know if you all ever worked with that, but I think it's actually created by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It's like his project, and it is essentially a site where people can come together and collaborate and work with sort of like open use media assets that they all put forward, whether it's like imagery or movies, or they say like I'll do the voiceovers, I'll do the film, I'll do the editing, or like I'll take this image and then I'll fork it and then we'll put it back in. And you can actually follow attribution the whole way through, but it is a platform, and I never used it because I was like, man, I want to buy into all this, like what is all this shit, like who's this actor, what are his motivations, is he actually just a cool guy, like it's hard to tell, so yeah,
Right.
it's really interesting.
It's hard to bypass like all the political hotspots in a way because there are more levels, like starting with top level domains and to the visual representations. So yeah, but I think it's an important thing to think about, and probably everything will be tracked in the future. So yeah,
It is.
we should kind of
It is
claim the possibility of distributed attribution, because like what we're seeing today, especially in the I'm constantly when I'm talking about the art scene, I'm talking about the local context. Like there's not enough info being distributed. You only get the semantic data and not any technical data. And actually, we're now currently looking forward to collaborating on one project that will be tracking contemporary creation art, which is quite important because actually it doesn't, if you're looking from the outside, it doesn't exist. It's not there, nothing is there. Everything is printed and kind of thrown away in an archive, and it's non-existing, even though maybe the artwork is digital, somebody participated on it, and it's built on some code, and it's built like in physical space, but it's only kept like for project documentation purposes, and you actually lose a lot of effort and a lot of visibility in regard like what the artist scene today is and what the artist processes are, and it's kind of creating a problem on this one practical level of the community not actually cherishing the amount of work that's put into it. So it is a bit abstract and too wide, but it's all kind of interconnected, and now that actually know what metadata is, I can realize like what could be a small part of the solution.
You know, it's kind of the same thing with just globally encrypting everything. I mean, teaching people how to encrypt stuff will not work. It needs to be implemented at a lower level, and everything just needs to be encrypted by default. So if you wanted to implement like art tracking, like an art tracking universe, it should just be implemented in the formats themselves. It shouldn't be something people need to work at, because
That's true.
but that's a completely different theme.
I mean, of course, like also all of this is in the context of global hyper-capitalism. So there's always the influence of corporatist agendas, as well as on a smaller scale, what I was saying earlier about people needing to sustain themselves in different ways and needing to be able to afford to do what they are trying to do. But also I want to say that all of this really reminds me of 3 quotes that I've been thinking about and feeling about a lot lately. And the first is that nothing belongs to us, even the air that we breathe. We're exhaling it, it doesn't belong to us, but it's passing through us. And the second is that everything is sacred. And the third is that all private property is theft.
That's so French.
So it's Islamic, and then it's First Nations, and then it's Karl Marx in that order.
Wait, what? Property is theft?
Private property.
Oh, right. Oh,
Yeah, probably.
I thought it was put on French, sorry.
No.
So I partially, that is to say that I'm often wondering about why, I mean, I know why this matters on a lot of different levels. I know why it matters, but also I think that it's worth our time to question how and why it matters who did what and who it belongs to. And I feel that one of the current and future situations that we're in, especially in terms of glitch and glitch art, is that now with the aesthetics and the techniques that have become so much more known, so much more widely known and more knowable, they become much more widely discovered and discoverable. So in other words, like, people know how to glitch and they know how to glitch art, but then the question, I hope, becomes, what are they doing and what are the concepts and contexts that they are operating in? And I really do hope that that becomes, that it is and it continues to become more pivotal and more meaningful for the people that are making and that are experiencing the glitch art.
John, you just described the next year's topic of food. I'm glad you mentioned it because it's disregard the visual, the aesthetic output of one work. It's like important why does one do something that it does. So yeah, that's something we would love to discuss on next year's FUBAR, and yeah, we would also love to have you here next time, like without the keyboards. So we're gonna try to make that happen if you'd be interested in available, because it's also like it's like the art is a bit out of context when like a normal non-glitching person comes to see it. They only see the aesthetics of it and they don't kind of connect the dots, and I think it's actually quite impossible. It's possible for somebody who's kind of seeing like dozens and hundreds of pieces every day and realizing what are their kind of spawning locations and what's their frequency and what's their direction, and that's what we're trying to track with the big amount of pieces presented to FUBAR. So we'd really like to context some like shed some light on a few special pieces and a few special works and theses, and describe as much as we can, just to kind of just to contribute to the global understanding of what's happening right now. So yeah, thanks for mentioning it and creating a nice opportunity for me to impolitely publicly invite you to the next one.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to jump through the screen.
Not working.
So yeah, thanks Stephanie for having me here today on this in this space. And,
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I don't know if anybody has any more questions, or we can kind of let you go if you want.
Or you can, like, we can take you to the hackerspace and you could be with us also.
Yeah. If you
what was the
want.
last part?
We can like carry you to the hackerspace and you can have a beer with us later.
Noon isn't too early.
Huh?
Yeah, I said noon isn't too early. It's like 12.
Yeah.
I can have.
Yeah, it's 12:30.
Yeah.
I'll make it around 5 a.m. then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite funny. Like good times for us are 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's our daily schedule, you know.
Does anybody have an extra question?
I mean, just a comment, which is that it stuns me that every time I think about glitch art in any depth, it just like immediately roots down to like capitalism and the arts and like the entire world and why we're fucking doing this and you know, like when I'm going to die. And I'm just like, oh god. So yeah, I'm very interested to see how we continue to deal with this problem with the imperfect tools of R&D and broadcasting in the future. Because I feel like those are the two sides which are as needed to the public personally.
I never liked the word problem though.
The circumstance. I mean, it's not a problem. None of this is really a problem, you know. But it is interesting if you care about the situation it is.
Right. I mean, recently, within the last few years, there's been a real change that has been brought upon via indie games development, where indie games have been able, in the last few years, to be crowdfunded, and so that people's budgets were able to be built on the basis of crowdfunding, and then they were able to create new games that were not ever possible before, and then they were able to release them and sell them in very independent ways and profit from that. And some people in the games communities that I talked to say that that window has closed or is closing. You know, it's more narrow now. But it definitely wasn't a time period in the last few years where that was really possible. And then, of course, you know, you can recall there was a time also when, you know, quote unquote alternative music, independently produced music, and independent labels for music. There was also a moment in the 90s when that became very viable economically. You know, of course, one of the issues with capitalism is that it's absorbative. It absorbs like everything that it encounters very aggressively, including when it encounters something that's diametrically opposed to it. You know, like let's say, I don't know, communism. You know, it's very like successful in general at like trying to absorb everything that it encounters. So there's a question of like staying resistant and staying resilient, like staying resistant so that you can have enough space to do what you need to do, and staying resilient so that you have enough energy to do what you need to do.
That's kind of what we're doing, you know, because we're like, nobody owns anything, and at the same time, we try to like distribute it properly so that if the case comes up that someone earns money from it, then the money should go to the actual person who's doing it. And at the same time, like nobody owns any art, actually. I mean, you could just take it, and nobody would care, really. I mean, if it came out in the community, then we would care, but I mean, theoretically, someone could just take all our art off Facebook and use it to do whatever, and we couldn't do anything about it, you know?
Yeah, I think I agree with Wei in the way that you're describing it, Wei, when you said, you didn't say this exactly, but you were talking about the person who's built this platform, and you were saying basically about his intent, like, does he mean harm, or is it a good faith effort, or is it dangerous to get involved in it because it's going to be exploitative resource extraction? And so this is really a question of intent and also of ethics. Like Google said for years that they meant no harm, they would do no evil, but of course they were lying.
And they also changed it.
They changed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they were lying in the first place, and then they changed it so they would have to lie less.
That's versioning their
Basically, when they got into big data, then they changed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. You gonna have drinks now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my water. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.
John, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope to hear you sometime soon and see you. So. Bye.
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 Okay, yeah, first.
Still here.
Who's gonna hang up, you know?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Oh God, who are these people? Horrible. Yeah, we should bring this to the lot. We're sitting here and we'll go for Everybody grab their own chair.